My best friend, Pablo, has always been like a brother to me. Our friendship began in childhood and continued throughout our lives. And Laura, his wife, became part of my family, someone with whom I shared countless moments. However, what started as an innocent friendship with Laura ended up turning into something that should have never happened. Join me as I recount how a night of weakness almost destroyed everything I valued most. My friendship with Pablo was unbreakable, or at least I always believed it to be. We grew up together, shared dreams, and supported each other through all of life's moments. When he met Laura, I welcomed her with open arms. She was fun, charming, and quickly became an essential part of our group. The friendship among the three of us grew over the years, but eventually, I began to feel something I should have never felt for her. At first, it was just fleeting thoughts, brief moments when I admired how Laura lit up any room she entered. But the more time passed, the more I realized those thoughts were becoming more persistent. Guilt gnawed at me, but I tried to suppress any idea that could lead me to betray my best friend. What began as simple admiration turned into something deeper. Laura was an incredible woman, full of life, and I began to feel an attraction I couldn't explain. I convinced myself it was just a phase, something that would fade away with time. After all, how could I betray Pablo, the man who had always been like a brother to me? Yet, those thoughts didn't go away. In fact, they were always present, hidden in every encounter, in every smile she gave me. The worst part was that Laura seemed to notice, and a silent tension began to rise between us. One day, Pablo had to go out of town for work. Laura called me, asking for help with a small problem at her house, a stuck door. As always, I went right over without thinking twice. Our friendship was so solid that I saw nothing wrong with helping her. When I arrived, everything seemed normal. Laura greeted me with her warm smile, and together we resolved the problem. After we finished, Laura invited me to stay for a while and have a glass of wine. This was something we had done before, but that night everything felt different. There was a tension in the air, something neither of us could ignore. The conversations, which had previously been light and casual, began to take on a different depth, and I realized that what I felt for her was reciprocated. Our eyes met more than once, and there was a silent complicity between us. Something was about to happen, and I knew it wasn't right. Laura looked at me with a smile that disarmed me and said, "Sometimes I feel like you and I share something more than we say. Have you ever felt that?" Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I knew what she meant, and I knew I should laugh it off or change the subject, but I stood there paralyzed, my heart racing. "Laura, we can't," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Pablo is my best friend. This isn't right." As I said those words, I felt something inside me had already crossed a line. Laura moved closer, her eyes locked on mine, and before I could react, her lips brushed against mine. It was a soft kiss, but filled with an intensity one didn't expect. My mind screamed for me to stop, but my body didn't respond. We kissed for a few seconds that felt eternal. But soon reality hit me. I quickly pulled away from Laura, my eyes filled with guilt and regret. This shouldn't have happened. "Pablo. He's my friend, I betrayed him," I said, feeling the weight of guilt grow in my chest. Laura also looked confused, regretful, but there was sadness in her eyes. We both knew we had crossed a line that we couldn't undo. The air became heavier, and guilt began to envelop us. "I know. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened," Laura replied, her voice shaking. I hastily got up and left her house without looking back. As I walked to my car, I felt the air was thick, as if every breath was difficult. My heart was in chaos, and the images of what had happened tormented me with every step. When I got into the car, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. How could I have let this happen? How could I look Pablo in the eye after this? Guilt consumed me, and remorse gnawed at me. I knew that in that moment of weakness, I had destroyed the trust Pablo had always placed in me. In the days that followed, I did everything I could to avoid Laura. I ignored her messages, her calls, and distanced myself from her completely. I knew it was best not to see her again unless Pablo was present, and I withdrew. A week later, Pablo called me. His voice sounded cheerful, carefree, and that only increased my guilt. He invited me to one of our traditional family dinners. I wanted to say no, but refusing the invitation would raise suspicions. So I accepted, even though I knew being under the same roof as Laura would be unbearable. When I arrived at Pablo's house, it was Laura who opened the door. We greeted each other politely, but the tension between us was evident. Pablo, on the other hand, suspected nothing and hugged me enthusiastically, as if everything were normal. During dinner, I tried to act normally, but every time our eyes met, guilt consumed me. Pablo's words about the love he felt for Laura and the trust he placed in me only made everything harder to bear. I realized at that moment how close I had come to ruining everything: our friendship, his marriage, and my own integrity. When the night ended, Pablo asked to speak with me on the terrace. My heart raced, fearing that somehow he had discovered what had happened. We sat in silence for a few moments before he spoke. "You know, brother," he finally said, looking at me with a sincere smile, "I don't know what I would do without you. You've always been by my side, and I trust you like no one else." Those words were like a stab to the heart. I wanted to confess everything to him at that moment, to tell him the truth, but the words stuck in my throat. I could only nod, with a weak smile. That night, as I drove home, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I had made a mistake that almost cost me my most important friendship, and I couldn't let it happen again. I decided to cut all unnecessary contact with Laura and limit my visits to her house only when Pablo was present. The days that followed were tough, but I managed to distance myself from Laura without Pablo noticing. I focused on strengthening other friendships, immersing myself in my work, and making sure to steer clear of anything that could jeopardize what truly mattered. The kiss with Laura was a painful lesson about how easily one can cross a line when swept up in emotion and vulnerability. I learned that, even though temptation can be strong, it's not worth sacrificing a friendship built on years of trust and loyalty for a fleeting moment of weakness. Now, I'm more determined than ever to value what I have with Pablo and not let a moment of desire make me lose sight of what really matters.